The events and happenings in Death Note start out in Shinigami, home of the death god Ryuk, who has apparently dropped his book, Death Note, on Earth after boredom drove him to visit the planet. A 17-year-old genius high school student Light Yagami notices the said book in the middle of the street and picks it up. With the text written in English, Light can only make out the fact that his discovery is a notebook related to death and has specific rules guarding its usage. At first, Light outrightly dismisses the notebook as an apparent prank, but 5 days later he is seen observing it, and in that instance, the death god Shinigami Ryuk appears out of nowhere. Ryuk renounces ownership of the Death Note to Light and goes on to explain the rudiments of its nature and mode of working to Light. If Light were to give the Death Note to another human, his memories as it relates to the note would be erased. Light is the only one whom Ryuk is visible to. Users of the Death Note are absolved of the heaven or hell destiny. In the first use of the Death Note, Light is seen watching TV where a man has taken hostage of about 8 people in Shinjuku. Light proceeds to write down his name in the Death Note, and true to the words of Shinigami, 40 seconds later the man is pronounced to have died of a heart attack. This marked the start of Light's journey of being the watchman for the international crime community, and he soon became known by his incognito identity of Kira, which is derived from the Japanese pronunciation of the word killer. His action was soon to attract the attention of the Interpol, who were bent on unmasking the identity of the self-made vigilante. To this regard, they employed the services of Detective L, who is an acclaimed detective that has successfully cracked numerous cases worldwide. Detective L is quick to point out that Light can terminate the life of anyone by just knowing their name and seeing their face. This highly accurate prediction further demonstrates Detective L's impetus and tactical bravado. Using a localized TV footage that was described to audiences as an international broadcast, Detective L was able to infuriate Light and trick him into revealing his real location. This kickstarted the manhunt of Light by Detective L. Detective L sets up an anti-Kira, as mentioned before. Kira is the alias of Light task force that is charged with ensuring that the manhunt was fruitful. This task force, which is majorly comprised of individuals from the local police authority, also includes Light's father Soichiro Yagami, who is the chief detective of the Japanese National Police Agency, further complicating issues for Light. Light goes on to college, where he tries to infiltrate the anti-Kira task force to find out the real identity of L and murder him. He succeeds in joining the anti-Kira task force but is handicapped and cannot outrightly murder Detective L, who is also suspicious of him. To further complicate matters for Light, a second Kira, Misa Amane, in her Shinigami eyes finds out that Light is the real Kira. She immediately submits to him, confessing that he is her role model since he killed the criminals who murdered her parents. However, through the course of time, because of her deeply founded love for Light and her overall careless attitude, Misa slips up and reveals certain key details that put both her and Light at a disadvantage. This builds up suspicion for Detective L, who is now almost sure that Light is the real Kira and convinced that Misa is the second Kira. Subsequently, Misa is detained and is at the risk of divulging the truth to the police and Detective L. After denying Misa food for some days coupled with incessant interrogations, she was at her breaking point, at the edge of spilling the truth. This forces Light to come up with an ingenious plan to finally trump over the elusive Detective L. Light teamed up with Misa's Shinigami Rem, and relinquishing their Death Notes, both Light and Kira are stricken clean of all memories he had of using the Death Note. Rem was to find a new recipient of the Death Note, the third Kira, who would proceed with the sanctimonious killings of criminals to absolve the now detained Light and Misa of any guilt. The plan turned out successful, and although Detective L still had certain reservations about Light, Light had demonstrated that he was beyond any reprieve. The new Kira, third Kira, Kyosuke Higuchi, is a member of the Yotsuba group and has engaged in a killing spree of top officials of rivals companies that ensured a steady rise in Yotsuba group's earnings. He was soon discovered via the tactical cooperation of Detective L, Light, Misa and the anti-Kira task force. On his arrest, Light only needed to touch the notebook to return all memories he had with it. Using a torn piece of the note he kept, as was part his plan, he proceeded to kill Kyosuke Higuchi, once again cementing him as the new owner of the Death Note. Light goes on to manipulate Rem into killing L after orchestrating a well-crafted scheme that saw Misa once again brought into the limelight of being the suspected Kira. As an ultimate sign of love, Rem violates the Shinigami rule of inducing death to prolong the lifespan of a human. She dies as a result. To avert the outright cancellation of the anti-Kira task force, Soichiro and the rest of the team decided to play down the death of Detective L and prevent the information from going public. In lieu, Light was to act as Detective L. 4 years later, two men, Nier and Mello, who grew up in one of Watari's, the hacker of the Anti-Kira Task Force orphanage, are brought into the picture. These men have been groomed to be the real successors of Detective L. Nier goes on to form an alliance with the United States, disclosing to them the hidden death of L and claiming to be his rightful successor. The US believe his account and head on to form the Special Provision for Kira SPK, which Nier heads. Mello, on the other hand, has turned into a mafia boss and is hell-bent on getting the locked-up Death Note from the hands of Soichiro, the caretaker. To this end, he proceeds to kidnap both the country's NPA director and Soichiro's daughter Seiyu. Through a well-thought plan, Mello manages to recover the confiscated Death Note from the Japanese police via Soichiro. In order to retrieve the Death Note, Light has to work in collaboration with Nier and the US government. After discovering the location of Mello, they swoop in to get back the Death Note and were successful. However, the operation led to the death of Light's father Soichiro. Following Soichiro's death, Nier becomes overly suspicious of Light, and suspects that he Kira. Nier drafts up a plan to expose Light. He proceeds to sow seeds of doubt and mistrust among the members of Kira investigation team by challenging the circumstances surrounding Detective L's death and the brevity of the 13-day rule. And soon enough, following an exquisitely orchestrated tactical ambush, some members of the Kira investigation team, prominent among which is Aizawa, begin to see the light in Nier's theory that Light was indeed the Kira. Aizawa subsequently leaves to team up with Nier. As a backup plan, Light recruits a pro-Kira individual, Teru Mikami, who thinks the Kira is a god and ultimately perfect. Mikami then goes on to hire Takada as the spokesperson of the Kira movement. Mello, who has been shadowing the whole events and happenings, realizes that Kiyomi Takada is closely associated with Light. This leads him to kidnap her. However, Takada manages to kill Mello and to eliminate any possible leads. She, in turn, is killed by Light. Resultant of the kidnappings, Mikami demonstrated that he and Light were in fact closely tied to the Kira charade, and the Kira investigative team in collaboration with Nier are able to successfully trick and trap them, forcing a confession out of Light. In a frantic attempt to kill Nier, Light tries to write Nier's name but is shot in the hand by Matsuda, member of the Kira investigative team. Relentless, he continues to write but draws more shots from Matsuda, who was once loyal to him. In the final attempt at killing them, Light calls on to Ryuk to aid him in writing the names. Instead, Ryuk picks up the paper and scribbles Light's name, fulfilling a prophecy he made mention to Light in the beginning when he first found the Death Note. That is it for today, guys. I hope you liked the video. If you then please subscribe. And tell me in the comments section next on which topic do you want.